Come senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. For he that gets hurt will be he who is stalled. The battle outside raging will soon shake your windows and rattle your walls. For the times, they are a-changin'. Welcome back to Jokingly Serious, my friends. That little quote right there comes from a man whose voice, much like mine, sounds like nails on a chalkboard. Bob Dylan. Now, hopefully, you saw the title card and you know where this is heading. So grab your slippers, snag your cane, and shut off your soap operas. We're taking a look at the people that run this country. Those with true vigor. The charismatic, the strong in mind and body. The youngsters and whippersnappers shuffling down the halls of Congress with tennis balls on their walkers and scrotums that sag 3 feet behind them. We're talking about the geriatric elite who refuse to acknowledge the passing of their time, or even really a semblance of what time it is. Now, I'm not one to scoff at the concept of earned wisdom, but when the head of the House of Representatives can't remember who or where he is, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee looks like an extra on The Walking Dead, and the leader of the free world can't wake up before noon or work past 5, you have to start wondering to yourself, why are our elected leaders more likely to have seen the Beatles live than to know who Taylor Swift even is? We have an age requirement to vote. It's 18. We have an age requirement to run the United States. It's 35. And we have an age requirement to collect Social Security. It's 65. However, there are no legal restrictions on being too old for anything. Except for Chuck E. Cheese, 14. Learned that one the hard way. For example, I don't think anyone above 70 should be able to drive. Hot take. As much as I love going 25 on the highway and leaving my left blinker on for the entire trip from Portland to Seattle, I'm smart enough to recognize that those are dangerous actions when operating a motor vehicle. Look, I've been told to say that I loved my great-grandmother, but she once put a 6-pack of Mike's Hard Lemonade in a pitcher at Thanksgiving and got me sorority girl drunk when I was 9. She also called me Tommy for the last 3 years of her life because I was wearing a Tommy Hilfiger shirt on my 7th birthday. Grandma Ruth died at 78. President Biden will turn 82 1 week after the next election, and he'll be in charge of the largest military on earth. Ruth wasn't even allowed to run her bingo league because she forgot how to read. So what is it? Am I just too young to understand the political geniuses that are Dark Brandon and Yertle the Turtle McConnell? Or should someone sit Grandpa down and tell him he's too old to hit another mailbox with his Cadillac? Ladies and gentlemen, it might be time to take the keys from Grandpa. But let's come to that conclusion together in this week's Jokingly Serious Broad Look. It's February 10th, 1967, and Congress has officially ratified a brand new amendment to the Constitution, number 25. This referendum was a crucial piece of legislation that created and clarified a third way for the United States president to be removed from office. It required a resignation from the sitting president via letter to the leaders of Congress. The other possible ways are a little more complicated, but we'll get to that in a sec. Option 1 should be kind of obvious. Death or assassination. Although there have been many assassination attempts against a sitting U.S. president, whether that be via bullet or shoe, only 4 have ever succeeded. In order, it goes: Abraham Lincoln, by bullet; James A. Garfield, by bullet; William McKinley, by bullet; and John F. Kennedy, by the CIA. However, 8 have died in office. Of those not listed, William Henry Harrison was killed for being an absolute windbag. Zachary Taylor by eating too many cherries and green apples. Warren G. Harding, probably by his wife. That one is wild, and I promise to cover it eventually. Finally, though, we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt by a series of strokes. There have also been 2 presidents who were unable to perform their duties due to severe illness. Those 2 are Woodrow Wilson, who suffered a really bad stroke and was left brain dead for the rest of his life. Actually, here's a fun fact. Wilson's wife is considered the first female president by many American historians, since she ran the country for the last 18 months of his presidency without telling his cabinet. The last president who was unable to perform his duties for a considerable amount of time was Dwight D. Eisenhower. You see, Ike had a potato for a heart, which led to then Vice President Nixon taking over his formal duties in his many leave of absences. Funny enough, the only president to ever invoke the 25th Amendment would be future President Tricky Dick, who put it in his 2 weeks via letter to Congress. Other than the 25th Amendment and death or assassination, there is one final way to remove the president, and that is via impeachment. Now, not a single president has ever been removed via impeachment, but there have been 3 who were impeached and acquitted. Those presidents are Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump. Now, you know Trump has to one-up everybody, so he holds the distinct honor of being the only president to have been impeached twice. The list of presidents who people have tried to impeach is long. And more often than not, it's over something trivial, like doing fork, spoon, knife, rather than fork, knife, spoon. Instead of like a real crime, like invading a foreign nation without the approval of Congress. Unless your name is Reagan. Joe Biden is no spring chicken, by any means. But neither is Donald Trump. At 80 and 77 respectively, the two leading political candidates going into the next election both have one foot in the grave. It's kind of like picking a snack, and your choices are a rotten banana or a moldy orange. It's easier to see the banana as gross, but both fruits are going to give you the shits for a lot longer than you'd like. The thing with Biden is, he's so obviously going through a mental decline that his current press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre Wood, is even writing his tweets for him now. This guy trips more often than your favorite burnout from high school, and his strongest political opinion is that chocolate chip ice cream is better than vanilla. Look, I think Helen Keller would give this guy a run for his money in a debate. He is undeniably starting to go senile, and not in the fun grandpa might say something racist at Thanksgiving way, but more in like the, whoops, I thought the nuclear button was how you turned on 60 Minutes way. Knowing how difficult it is to get a president out of office once they're elected, the Democratic National Convention need to have some balls and put him on stage to debate people like Bobby Kennedy and Marianne Williamson. The thing about bullshit is that you can usually smell it before you have to taste it. And I'll be honest, I don't think it's Biden's diaper that reeks. Okay, remember earlier when I said the second method for removing a president with the 25th Amendment is really hard to do? Well, that's because it requires the vice president as well as the entirety of the presidential cabinet to write a letter to Congress saying the president is unfit for duty. If the president doesn't formally respond within 4 days, the vice president becomes president. If the president does respond, the VP and cabinet have 2 days to do the same thing again. If they do, Congress has to hold an emergency vote within 48 hours to officially and possibly forcibly remove the president from office. During this period, whoever sent the last letter to Congress is acting president. The problem is, unless something drastic happens, like a kidnapping or the president getting bit by a vampire, you just wouldn't see the president's own people turn on him. The likelihood of an entire cabinet, appointed by the president, forming a mutiny against the president that appointed them is extremely low. But in the case of a president being mentally unfit for duty, this would be the only way to get their butt out of the chair in the Oval Office. Now, the process for a member of Congress is relatively easier. All that's required is a vote to be called by that member's party and a 2/3 vote to expel them by whichever branch they're a part of. This method is called expulsion. There are also two more options, and they're known as censure and recall. Censure only requires a simple majority of 51 votes, but think of censure more like a formal way of everyone you work with calling you a douche. Every mention of censure pretty much just says it's a shaming method rather than a real stoppage of political power. The last method is actually pretty cool. Now, it varies state by state, but it can be introduced either by a politician, and this one is one of the few times you can do this, but by signatures, by the people the politician represents. Ipso facto, you, me, and a bunch of citizens can get together and decide that our politician isn't acting in our best interest. Now, if a recall gains approval, it still has to go to vote. However, there have been over 50 successful recalls of political figures in the history of the United States, varying from senators all the way down to county judges. Now let's circle back to the two walking corpses deciding the fate of America, Senator Feinstein and Representative McConnell. You should know why their parties haven't taken action. If in the case of either of them, stepping down or dying in office, the decision to replace them wouldn't go to a vote. It would be done by appointment. In the case of Dianne Feinstein, it would go to Governor Gavin Newsom to decide who replaces her. He has outright said that if he were to replace her, it would be with a black woman. And let me tell you, that really pissed off Nancy Pelosi, a woman who, up until a handful of months ago, was the de facto leader of the Democratic Party. You see, Pelosi wants to get her old buddy, Representative Adam Schiff, into the senatorial position. If Dianne Feinstein resigns or expires, that just won't happen. So she's fighting tooth and nail to weekend at Bernie's Senator Feinstein long enough to get to the next election cycle. Pelosi's gone as far as to have her own daughter wheeling Feinstein around Congress, keeping her away from anybody who can tell she's physically melting. McConnell's situation is just as bad. You see, recently, the Kentucky legislature amended the law of the land by stating that the governor had to select from a list of 3 replacements decided by a group of unelected officials. The governor of that state, Andy Beshear, has outright said that he disagrees with that legislation, and he has not promised to follow through with it if he's forced to. Look, all of this is to say that the people running our country should be less worried about holding on to power and more worried about the well-being of our nation. I'm not trying to say that we should kill all of the old people like in a Twilight Zone episode, but I do have the controversial opinion that you should be able to write your own tweets if you're going to run the country. The other day, my 70-year-old grandma told me that her neighbor's a furry, and she knew what a fursona was. I don't know where the bar should be for political office, but at least start there. It's up to us to start doing something rather than just saying something. We have to start putting pressure on our leaders to do better. And if that doesn't work, then we need to start getting signatures together to have an intervention and take the keys from Grandpa. Because it's not just unimportant shit like mailboxes or kids on tricycles we're talking about here, but the fate of this country. And in the case of the nuclear button, the entire world. All right, guys, appreciate you all watching. Please like the video if you've made it this far. Comment below with something you'd like to see in a future episode. Don't forget to Don't forget to subscribe. As always, I'm Cole Carter, and this was Jokingly Serious. Have a great day and an even better night.
Wake up in the morning, I got no clothes. She continues snoring, I gotta go. Another night I'm trying to forget, getting boring. She tripping but she keep on pouring. Oh, she wanna know. Wake up in the morning, think I'll make it in the moment. Wake up in the morning, wake up in the morning. This language is foreign. I'm back where I started. Wait, class already started. I'm late according to Kobe Sonder than never started retarded. How you treat me? Just teach me. I'd rather have detention, never comprehending what I'm reading. Fade me.